Hello and welcome to today's historical essay. We are going to talk about Oskar Fischinger. Oskar Fischinger was born on June 22, 1900 in Gelhausen, Germany. He spent his youth as a musician and an apprentice draftsman in an architect's office, ultimately receiving a diploma in engineering. In 1920, Fischinger was introduced to film critic Bernard Diebold. Taken by Fischinger's abstract scroll sketches, Diebold introduced him to the artistic potential of filmmaking. The following year, Fischinger attended the first public screening of Walter Ruttmann's light play Opus 1. Fischinger was so moved by Ruttmann's film that he decided to devote his life to the creation of absolute cinema, also known as non-narrative film. This style of experimental film perfectly incorporated his musical and graphic arts skills. Fischinger's films of the early 1920s are examples of his most radical work, perhaps due to his interest in pushing past the more traditional romantic features of Ruttmann's films. In the films Wax Experiments and Spirals, he portrayed hypnotic, complex visual patterns interrupted by striking singular frames of contrasting imagery, and experimented with his unique editing style again, ultimately creating a series of film performances called Raumlichtkunst. Space light music, abstract multiple projection shows first performed in Germany in 1926. Raumlichtkunst is widely considered to be far ahead with its dynamic inventiveness, described as dazzling, an exhilarating phantasmagoria of abstraction and metaphor by the New York Times in 2012. Following the restoration of Fischinger's original nitrate film by the Center of Visual Music. In the 1930s, he moved to Berlin and started producing more and more abstract animations that ran before featuring films. Fischinger was a fixture of the German art world during the early 1930s, but the Nazi regime saw abstract art as decadent and a threat. The Nazis were some of the most fanatical art critics of the 20th century, and they hated anything non-representatorial. The likes of Paul Klee, Oskar Kokoschka, and Vasily Kandinsky, among others, were written off as degenerate. Shortly after the production of Composition in Blue, Oskar Fischinger rushed to Hollywood, both in an effort to escape Nazi persecution and to pursue an opportunity at Paramount Studios. At a time when much of animation was consumed with little anthropomorphized animals sporting white gloves, Oskar Fischinger went in a completely different direction. His work is all about dancing geometric shapes and abstract forms spinning around a flat featureless background. Think of a Mondrian or Maverick painting that moves, often in time to the music. Fischinger's movies have a mesmerizing elegance to them, like his 1938 short, An Optical Poem. Circles pop, sway and dart across the screen, all in time to Franz Liszt's Second Hungarian Rhapsody. This, of course, well before the days of digital. While it might be relatively simple to manipulate a shape in a computer, Fischinger's technique was decidedly more low-tech. Using bits of paper and fishing line, he individually photographed each frame, somehow doing it all in sync with Liszt's composition. Think of the hours of mind-numbing work that must have entailed. The problem was that Hollywood was really not ready for Fischinger. Producers saw the obvious talent in his work, and they feared that it was too ahead of its time for broad audiences. Fischinger composed the optical poem to Franz Liszt's Second Hungarian Rhapsody for MGM, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, a film studio in the United States, but received no profits for his work. Much like his best-known work set to Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor for Walt Disney's Fantasia, the artist got no credit for his work. Fischinger was furious when his abstract shapes were turned into half-seen violin bows and stylized mountain peaks for Fantasia. For his part, Walt Disney was uncomfortable with Fischinger's often uncompromising avant-garde vision. After numerous struggles in the American film industry, Fischinger increasingly pursued the medium of oil painting. marrying both passions in his film Motion Painting No. 1 from 1947. The film, capturing the process of painting by shooting every brushstroke, won the Grand Prix at the Brussels International Experimental Film Competition in 1949. Fischinger died in Los Angeles in 1967, but continues to live on in his work. 3 of his films made the list of world's greatest films in the 1984 Olympiad of Animation. Motion Painting No. 1 remains on the National Film Registry of the United States Library of Congress to this day. He is believed to have created over 50 short films and 800 canvases in his life. Fischinger's artistic legacy is upheld by the Center for Visual Music in Los Angeles, which owns and manages the artist's films and papers. And that was all for today. Thank you for listening, and come back tomorrow for a new historical essay.